Chapter 1. The Whisper Behind the Door. A cold wind rattled the mullioned windows of Ashbourne Manor as Hercule Poirot stepped across the threshold into the dimly lit study. The late January dusk pressed against the glass, casting long shadows across shelves lined with leather-bound tomes and rare manuscripts. The heavy scent of pipe tobacco mingled with the faint perfume of jasmine, a curious combination that piqued Poirot's little grey cells immediately. Madame Baudouin said, lifting his bowler hat and bowing slightly to the lady whose trembling fingers clutched a silk handkerchief. "You summoned me with urgency. Pray explain." Madame Simone Baudouin, widow of the late Baron Etienne Baudouin, swallowed hard. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, voice quivering, "it is impossible. A voice spoke to me from within this very room. I found the study door locked from the inside, yet I heard him call my name as clearly as I hear you now." Poirot raised a slender finger. "You heard your husband?" She shook her head. No. The man is dead these 10 years. But the voice, it said, 'Simone, come here.' I tried the door. It would not budge. I thought myself mad." Behind them, the door stood solid and bolted. Poirot's keen gaze traced the brass bolt and then turned to the keyhole. Few signs of forced entry. Yet the lock, he noted, had been oiled recently. He knelt, inspecting the parquet beneath the threshold for disturbed dust. Nothing. "Show me, madam," Poirot instructed softly. She hesitated, then withdrew a small silver key from her reticule. Handing it over, she stammered, "It is the study key, monsieur. I keep it on me always." With deft precision, Poirot slid the key into the lock, turning it gently. The bolt clicked. The door swung inward on its creaking hinges. A blast of cold air swept past them, carrying a faint echo of whispered laughter. Madame Baudouin shrank back, eyes wide. Inside, the study bore no obvious signs of disturbance. The mahogany desk was pristine, the papers arranged in neat piles. A single mahogany chair had been turned, as though someone had leapt to their feet. A crystal tumbler, half full of brandy, sat untouched. Poirot's moustaches twitched in concentration. "Madam," he said, standing, "when did you last enter the study before tonight?" "Yesterday evening," she replied. I left. After supper. The butler locked up." "Ah, yes," Poirot murmured. "Monsieur Lucien. He is quite punctual in his duties, I understand." "Indeed, Lucien is most reliable." Her hand rose to her throat, fingertips brushing a slender locket. Poirot's eyes flicked to the locket, resting on the desk. The chain lay unbroken, but Madame Baudouin's own locket, he noticed, was identical in design. He picked up the one on the desk, examining the delicate engraving on its back. 2 interlaced initials, S.B. and E.B. "Madame, this belongs to you." Her breath caught. "Yes, that is my husband's locket. He gave it to me on our wedding day." "But you wear another," he asked, pointing to her neck. She placed a trembling hand to her throat. "Monsieur's locket was lost last year during our voyage to Italy. I had this made in its stead." She held up her replica. "I have worn it every day." Poirot set the desk locket beside its twin. 2 identical lockets, one lost at sea and 2 found in this room tonight. He paused, steepling his fingers. And yet no intruder, for the door was locked. In the corner, the fire sputtered low. A loose floorboard nearby caught his eye. Stooping, he pressed the wood. It yielded slightly. He tapped with his knuckles. A hollow sound. He pried at the edge, and a narrow compartment revealed itself beneath the board. Inside lay a small leather packet bound with twine. He withdrew it and unwrapped the contents. A faded letter in a spidery hand. "Look, madame," he said, unfolding the letter. "You recognize this handwriting?" Her face went pale. I think so. That is Monsieur Baudouin's writing." The letter read, "Simone, if ever you long for my voice, go to the study at the stroke of 9. I shall be there." She gasped. He could never have written this. He died before 9 o'clock that night. "No," Poirot agreed, "but someone has placed it here to suggest otherwise." He surveyed the room, mind racing through possibilities. The voice you heard, perhaps a recording, played through that secret compartment. The locket, the note, all cunning devices to ensnare you. Madame Baudouin's lips trembled. "But why? Who could—" "Monsieur Lucien, perhaps," Poirot mused, glancing toward the doorway. "Or one of the household. Someone who knew of the legend that the sealed study could speak to a lonely heart." Outside, the grandfather clock struck 9. Its toll reverberated through the hall. Poirot raised a hand. "We shall speak with Lucien at once. But first, madame, you must rest." As he guided her toward the door, Poirot paused, looking back at the silent desk, the 2 lockets, the concealed letter. His grey cells churned. The riddle of the sealed study had only just begun. Chapter 2. Echoes among the shelves. The following. Morning found Ashbourne Manor bathed in pale winter sunlight. Snow lay in crisp drifts outside the tall mullioned windows of the study, and within, Hercule Poirot moved with deliberate grace, his keen gaze sweeping over each object as though it might betray a secret. Madame Baudouin stood to one side, pale, but composed, while Lucien the butler hovered respectfully near the door. "You will forgive me, monsieur," Lucien said, voice calm, "but I assure you, I neither entered nor left the study after locking it last night. The key remained in my pocket." Poirot nodded. "You did this in the correct order, Lucien. You bolted the door, tested the handle, and pocketed the key?" "Precisely so, Monsieur Poirot." Lucien's shoulders were straight, his composure unbroken. "I then retired to my quarters, as is my habit after midnight." "Very good." Poirot turned to Madame Baudouin. "Madame, perhaps you will accompany me while I replicate your route. We must discover how this voice recorded itself, and who had both the opportunity and motive to employ such a device." Simone Baudouin inclined her head. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. I only wish this ordeal to end." Poirot led them through the library, its rows of ancient volumes untouched by modern dust. He paused at a tall shelf of brass-bound dictionaries, and pressed his fingers along the edge. "Madame, you spoke of jasmine and tobacco. The scent of tobacco is clear enough. But jasmine, how did that perfume find its way into the study?" She looked uncertain. "One of the maids sometimes burns incense in the morning, but never in the study. I noticed the fragrance last night, however faint, curious," Poirot murmured. He examined the shelves closely. Between 2 heavy tomes, a small metal rod protruded no more than a finger's width. He plucked at it. To the astonishment of both Baudouin and Lucien, the panel beside it swung inward, revealing a shallow recess. Inside lay a polished, cylindrical object, faintly yellowed with age. Poirot extracted the cylinder and held it to the light. "A wax phonograph cylinder," he declared, "a recording medium, quite ingenious. The device that spoke to Madame Baudouin lay concealed here. Who among you knew of its existence?" Lucien's face remained impassive. "I have served this household for 10 years, and never beheld such an object." Simone stepped forward. "Nor I, monsieur." Poirot handed the cylinder to Simone. "Read the inscription on its base." She peered at the worn gold lettering. "Voice of Etienne, 1908. Her lips trembled. Etienne recorded this himself, decades ago. "Indeed," Poirot said, "but only someone with both access to this secret shelf and knowledge of its contents could have activated it. Lucien, you maintain you never entered the study after locking it." "I swear it, monsieur." "Then perhaps we should inquire of the other staff." Poirot beckoned to the maid who served breakfast. "Mademoiselle Farrat, did you notice anyone near the study door last night after Lucien secured it?" The young woman shook her head. "No, sir. I was in the servants' hall until nearly midnight. All was quiet." Poirot turned back to Lucien. "And the phonograph itself? It requires a playback device. Have you ever seen one in this house?" Lucien frowned. "Not that I recall, monsieur." "Curious," Poirot muttered, stroking his moustaches. "It suggests 2 people, one to hide the cylinder, and another to operate the player. Either the playback device is hidden elsewhere, or the same person both concealed and activated it." He pocketed the cylinder. "We must locate the phonograph. Madam, I fear that voice was meant not merely to frighten you, but to lure you, here, to this very moment." Simone's eyes filled with dread. "To what end, monsieur? What could they hope to achieve?" Poirot regarded her kindly. "To unsettle you, perhaps to drive you from your husband's inheritance. But until we uncover the whole apparatus, we will not know. Lucien, I shall require full access to your quarters and the storage rooms." Lucien inclined his head. "Certainly, monsieur. I will conduct you myself." As they departed the study, Poirot paused at the threshold and looked back. The boarded corner where he had found the cylinder seemed to watch him, its secret revealed. Yet the manor held other hidden passages, other sly mechanisms waiting to be discovered, and as snow continued to fall, muffling the world outside, Poirot sensed the first stirrings of danger in the hush, a danger borne on a voice from beyond the grave. Chapter 3. The Hidden Player. Snowflakes drifted silently against the tall windows, as Poirot, Madame Baudouin, and Lucien made their way down the dim corridor leading to the servants' quarters. The hush of the manor was nearly oppressive, broken only by the distant ticking of clocks and the muted echo of their footsteps on the polished floor. Poirot's little grey cells were alight with possibility. Each detail, no matter how small, felt like a crucial clue in a larger design. They reached the door to Lucien's private rooms, a modest suite of simple wood panelling and modest furnishings. Lucien unlocked the door and ushered them inside. Poirot's gaze swept across the room. A neatly made bed, a writing desk, and a wardrobe. Yet his keen eye immediately noted the plush armchair in the corner, as though consciously placed for comfort. "Pray sit, mes amis," Poirot invited, gesturing toward the chair. Lucien perched on the bed's edge, Madame Baudouin on the small sofa. Poirot, however, moved with purpose to the writing desk, where a green-shaded lamp stood beside a decanter of port and 2 glasses. "Lucien," Poirot began, "this port decanter, when did you last refill it?" The butler hesitated a moment. "Yesterday afternoon, monsieur. The kitchen staff bring fresh decanters twice weekly." Poirot removed the lamp to inspect beneath its base. There, concealed by a false bottom in the desk drawer, lay a brass crank and a coiled tube of thin metal wiring. Poirot's moustaches quivered with delight. "Ah, a phonograph player," he declared. "Ingenious indeed. The cylinder you discovered in the study could only be played on such a device. This is the apparatus used to conjure the voice of Baron Baudouin." Madame Baudouin gasped. "You mean Lucien used this?" Lucien rose to his feet, voice calm but firm. "Madame, Monsieur Poirot, please understand. I have served this house with the utmost loyalty. I found these items here, hidden in the far corner of the storage room. I assumed them relics of the Baron's eccentric hobbies." Poirot held the brass crank aloft. "Relics which you then brought here and left conveniently in your drawer?" Lucien faltered. "I moved them here for safekeeping." "For safekeeping," Poirot repeated, arching an eyebrow. "And yet the maid wiring would allow the recording to be played remotely, perhaps from behind the walls or beneath the floorboards." He turned to Madame Baudouin. "Did you hear the voice coming from any particular spot last night?" She closed her eyes, as if recalling a dream. "From the panel beneath the floor, near the east corner. A hollow sound, then the whisper. Exactly where the cylinder lay concealed," Poirot said. "Lucien, you admit knowledge of these items?" The butler shook his head vigorously. "No, monsieur. I found them only yesterday, upon cleaning the East Wing storage, a place as few venture. I returned them here, intending to ask you about them." Poirot studied the wiring. "And this tube, it leads where?" Lucien pointed downward to the floorboards. "Beneath the desk. I discovered a loose panel and removed the items from there." Poirot knelt, pressing his ear to the floor. "Ah, yes, the wiring disappears into the subfloor. There must be a junction point. We need the maintenance rooms." Lucien's jaw tightened. "Monsieur Poirot, the maintenance room is locked. Only Mr. Fielding, the estate engineer, holds the key." "Then we shall see Mr. Fielding," Poirot said, rising. "Come, madame." They exited Lucien's quarters and retraced their steps, through the corridors, finally arriving at a stout oak door marked "Engine Room." Poirot rapped sharply. A heavy footfall approached, then the door swung inward to reveal Mr. Fielding, a stout, red-faced man in overalls, oil-smudged and, wiping his hands on a rag. "Monsieur Poirot," Fielding greeted with surprise. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Good evening, my friend," Poirot replied, his accent smooth. "I seek access to your engine room. There is a wiring conduit behind these walls that I wish to trace." Fielding frowned. "The wiring? Honestly, monsieur, I'm not aware of any unusual wiring, just the usual for lights and bells." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but I require permission to inspect." He gestured to the group. Madame Baudouin has been disturbed by a spectral voice from her study, and we believe the source is mechanical." Fielding's eyes darted to Madame Baudouin. She nodded politely. With a sigh, he retrieved a large brass key from his belt. "Very well. Please be careful. There's live current here." Poirot took the key and flicked the lock open. The door swung wide, revealing a cramped room of pipes, switches, and coils. A single gas lamp cast a flickering glow. Poirot slipped. Inside, Madame and Lucien closed behind. He followed the phosphate conduit along the wall until it branched into a cluster of wires unattached to any light bulb or bell. There, embedded in the plaster, lay a second secret switch, this one disguised as part of the electrical panel. Poirot flipped it, and a soft whirring filled the space. From a hidden speaker grill overhead, the voice of Baron Etienne Baudouin echoed faintly, "Simone, come here." Madame's hand flew to her mouth. Lucien staggered backward in shock. Poirot, however, remained composed, his eyes bright. "Now we have the instrument. But the question remains, who installed it and to what purpose?" He pocketed the brass crank. "We must return to the study. There, the final piece of this puzzle awaits." They departed the engine room, the echo of the Baron's voice still lingering in the shadows, as Poirot prepared to confront the mastermind of this elaborate deception. Chapter 4. Threads of Deceit. Snow muffled their footsteps as Poirot, Madame Baudouin, and Lucien retraced their path to the study. The manor's corridors, once grand and reassuring, now felt like arteries, carrying their anxieties to the heart of this mystery. Madame Baudouin's face was drawn, her fine features ghostly in the pale afternoon light, while Lucien's usual composure had given way to the tight shoulders of a man under suspicion. The study door stood closed, the lock turned back to its normal position after Poirot's earlier inspection. With a small nod from the detective, Lucien inserted the silver key and swung the door open. Madame stepped inside first, pausing in the threshold, as though the room itself might speak again. Only silence greeted them. "Observe carefully," Poirot instructed, moving to the fireplace. He knelt before the hearth, peering into the soot-blackened bricks. "Last night, the voice emanated from a concealed speaker. We must find its hiding place here as well." He extracted a small pocket mirror from his waistcoat, angling it behind the andiron. A tiny grill, hidden beneath a mantel support, reflected back. Poirot traced his finger along the pattern of soot and dust. "A speaker, oui," he murmured. But more than a mere recording device, this grill was fashioned to match the room's decor, its openings nearly imperceptible. He rose and approached the desk, now devoid of the phonograph cylinder and crank. These have been removed by whom? The engineer, the butler, or someone else entirely? Poirot's moustaches bristled as he surveyed Lucien. "Lucien, when you returned the cylinder to your quarters, did you notice anyone else observing?" "You?" Lucien swallowed. "No, monsieur. I assure you that I removed it alone." He glanced at Madame Baudouin. "It was only after discovering these strange devices that I felt compelled to seek counsel." His voice wavered. "I swear I meant no harm." Poirot nodded, but his eyes lingered on the flushed embers of suspicion growing in Lucien's cheeks. "Very well. Madame, might I trouble you to show me where you now keep your husband's original locket?" Simone unclasped the slender chain at her throat and lifted the locket forward. "This, monsieur." She held it delicately between thumb and forefinger. Poirot examined the engraving, SB and EB. He opened the locket, revealing a faded photograph of Simone and Etienne on their wedding day. "This replica is indistinguishable from the one found on the desk last night." He replaced it and looked at Madame. "And yet, only one is genuine. The other was placed to mislead." He strode to the bookcase and pulled a volume at random, a leather-bound anthology of romantic poetry. A click echoed. A panel swung inward, revealing a shallow niche containing 2 more wax cylinders, each labelled with a different date, one from 1905, the other from 1912. Poirot withdrew them gingerly. "More messages from beyond," he mused, turning each cylinder over. The mastermind intended not just a single haunting, but a protracted campaign of terror. He placed them on the desk and faced his companions. "We must ask, who stands to gain by frightening Madame Baudouin, and why use her husband's voice?" Madame's voice trembled. "My husband's estate is considerable. After his death, the inheritance was held in trust for our son Charles, who died in childhood. With no direct heir, his fortune will pass to distant relatives unless I produce a direct descendant." She pressed a gloved hand to her chest. "Without proof of such an heir, I stand to lose everything." Lucien exhaled softly. "Madame has always maintained that she bears no secret child." He looked at her with sympathy. "Nor do I believe otherwise." Poirot stroked his moustaches. "Yet someone hopes to prove the opposite, or to frighten you into admitting details that may not exist. They exploit your longing and fear." He picked up the cylinder dated 1905. "Perhaps these messages correspond to events in your marriage, moments when you were alone together. The dates and words might reveal personal secrets." He held the cylinder closer to Madame Baudouin. "Tell me, did you and your husband ever record your voices? He was known for his love of novelty, correct?" She hesitated, eyes downcast. We once experimented with a visiting inventor's phonograph at the Grand Fête of 1908, but my memory is hazy. I did not record messages for private use." Poirot nodded. "Then someone must have acquired these recordings elsewhere, perhaps from that fête's archives." He turned to Lucien. "You said you discovered these items in the East Wing storage. That room stores relics and forgotten curiosities, does it not?" "Indeed. Over the years, many items from estate events have been boxed and sent there." Lucien's expression softened. "I found these by accident, monsieur, caked in dust behind discarded trunks. So," Poirot concluded, "someone retrieved and distributed them. Cylinders to conceal voices, a playback device to unleash them, and lockets to misdirect. But only one person had both motive and access to each stage of this plot." He smiled with satisfaction. "We know the engineer controls the engine room and its wiring. The butler moves silently through every corridor, and Madame Baudouin's own memories provide the emotional key. But who else knows these secrets, madame's?" Breath caught. "My cousin Armand Duval visited last night. He has managed the estate's legal affairs for years." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur Duval, an attorney with opportunity and knowledge of inheritance law." He removed his hat and stood tall. "Let us confront him next. Only then will the full tapestry of deceit be revealed." As snow swirled beyond the windows, Poirot closed the study door behind them. The threads of suspicion were drawn taut, and soon, he vowed, the culprit would be unmasked. Chapter 5. The Council of Shadowslate that evening. The great hall of Ashbourne Manor lay quiet, its high-vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. A single lantern burned at the far end, casting a wavering pool of light across the polished marble floor. Poirot, Madame Baudouin, and Lucien stood before the tall oaken doors that led to the solicitor's study. Beyond those doors waited Armand Duval, the cousin and legal guardian whose crisp suit and cool demeanour had always commanded respect in the family. Poirot adjusted his cravat. Madame, Lucien, remain discreet. We are to ascertain whether Monsieur Duval is friend or foe in this affair. Simone Baudouin, her breathing steady despite the tension of the day, nodded curtly. Lucien, face set, handed Poirot a brass key. "He keeps his own study locked," the butler confirmed. "I noticed it when delivering papers earlier." Poirot accepted the key and ushered them inside. The study was small, panelled in dark oak, with shelves of legal tomes lining its walls. A heavy desk occupied the centre, its surface covered in neatly stacked documents bearing seals of Ashbourne estates. Behind it, Armand Duval sat in a high-backed leather chair, steepling his fingers as he regarded his visitors with thinly veiled curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot," Duval greeted, voice measured. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" "Good evening, monsieur," Poirot replied in his gentle French accent. "I apologize for the intrusion, but we require your counsel on a matter of some delicacy." Duval raised an eyebrow. "The more delicate the matter, the more I welcome discretion. Please, sit." He gestured to two chairs before the desk. Madame and Lucien seated themselves, while Poirot remained standing by the desk's edge. "Since night Madame Baudouin experienced a most unsettling phenomenon," Poirot began. A voice, purportedly that of her late husband, spoke to her from within her locked study. Through mechanical means, a concealed speaker and phonograph cylinders, the voice was projected as though from beyond the grave. Duval's expression remained impassive. "Certainly a curious development," he said, leaning back. "I admit to knowing nothing of such theatrics. Yet you are intimately familiar with Baron Baudouin's papers," Poirot observed, nodding toward the desk. "His correspondence, private journals, even the proof of his will. You knew well the importance of his marriage, his trust arrangements, and the contingency for heirs." Madame's hand trembled as she gripped the arm of her chair. Duval's gaze flicked to her before returning to Poirot. "I have acted only in the interest of the family legacy," he said, voice smooth. "My duty is to ensure that the estate passes according to strict legal guidelines." "And to secure your own position," Poirot ventured, raising a delicate eyebrow. Duval's composure faltered for the briefest instant. What implication do you suggest, monsieur?" Poirot unfolded a wax cylinder from his coat pocket and set it on the desk. This cylinder, dated 1912, bears a recording of Baron Baudouin's voice. Madame had no knowledge of its existence until it frightened her. Only two people could have masterminded this. One who knew of the cylinder's secret hiding place, and one who understood its significance in inheritance law. He leaned forward, gaze steady. "You, Monsieur Duval, and perhaps your hired engineer, Mr. Fielding, or the ever-loyal Lucien." He turned to Lucien. "Did you ever observe Monsieur Duval searching the East Wing storage?" Lucien cleared his throat. "I did, monsieur. Last week Monsieur Duval requested to inspect old trunks and ledgers in the storage rooms. I accompanied him. He seemed particularly interested in a dusty trunk marked 1908 fate recordings." Duval's face went pale. "I was verifying archival materials for Madame's memoirs," he said hurriedly. "I intended no harm. Intent need not be malicious to cause damage," Poirot replied. "By retrieving cylinders tied to your late cousin's intimate moments and deploying them in a mechanical plot, you hoped to frighten Madame into revealing whether she bore an heir, or to discredit her sanity and thus redirect the inheritance." Duval rose slowly. "This is preposterous," he exclaimed. "I would never." Madame rose too, eyes blazing. "Armand, your concern was always that the succession would bypass you. I have heard your whispered arguments with my husband's solicitor, suggesting that the strict terms of the trust could allow the estate to revert to you." Duval's shoulders sagged. "Yes, but I never considered such measures. Fear became stronger than reason." Poirot pressed a button on the desk, and a hidden speaker in the ceiling crackled. Once more the Baron's voice rang out. "Simone, come here." Madame clutched her chest. Lucien recoiled. Duval closed his eyes, shame flickering across his face. Poirot switched off the speaker. "You have no alibi for the engine-room intrusion on the night of the 7th, nor for the disappearance of the cylinders from your study desk just before the haunting began." Duval exhaled, voice low. "I am guilty, but I only sought leverage, not ruin. I wanted Madame to admit to Charles' existence, if any. I believe that would resolve the legal uncertainty." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "you yourself created the very doubt you feared. By shattering her peace, you almost lost everything." Duval sank back into his chair. "What now?" he asked. "Restoration," Poirot replied, placing a hand on Duval's shoulder. "You will assist in returning the cylinders, removing the wiring, and apologizing to Madame. Only then can the voice in the sealed study fall silent for good." And the lantern's flame flickered. The 4 figures gathered around the desk, no longer adversaries, but conspirators in righting a wrong. And in the hush that followed, Poirot allowed himself a small smile, for another mystery had been expertly unspooled. Chapter 6. The Ties That Bind. The following morning dawned crisp and clear at Ashbourne Manor, as though the very air had been cleansed of the previous night's deception. Hercule Poirot stood by the east window of the study, gazing out at the frost-kissed courtyard, while Madame Baudouin and Armand Duval conferred in hushed tones near the desk. Lucien hovered quietly, awaiting further instruction. "Monsieur Poirot," Lucien said, stepping forward, "we have removed all the concealed wiring from the walls and floorboards and dismantled each phonograph component. The room is once more as your investigation found it, undisturbed by mechanical artifice." Poirot smiled kindly. "Très bien, Lucien. You have served the truth with as much devotion as you serve this household. Now, my dear Madame, Armand, we shall restore these cylinders and the playback device to their rightful place, that no future soul may suffer a fright." Madame Baudouin nodded, her composure strengthened by the clarity of justice. "Yes, let us return them to the East Wing storage. And Armand, you will oversee the proper archiving so that no one is tempted again." Armand Duval inclined his head, the weight of his guilt evident but tempered by remorse. "I will see to it personally. The trust papers will note the cylinders as historical curiosities, not tools for intimidation." Poirot produced 3 wax cylinders from his coat pocket, the 1908, 1905 and 1912 recordings, along with the brass crank. He laid them gently on the desk. "These tainted memories belong with the other relics of Baron Baudouin's life, but under clear labels, emotional artifacts of a bygone era, not instruments of fear." He paused, eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. "Madame, the inheritance issue remains. If you truly believe no offspring survived to claim the estate, you may petition the court to confirm the reversion to your cousin, or you may choose to establish a new trust for local charities in memory of your husband and son." Simone gazed at the cylinders, then up at Poirot. I think I will create a foundation in their names. It is better than living in doubt and suspicion." Her voice trembled with resolution. "I shall donate a large portion of the estate to the orphanage and hospital my husband supported." Poirot's moustaches curved in gentle approval. "A noble choice, Mademoiselle Baudouin. Your husband would be proud, and your son's memory honoured." Armand cleared his throat. "Madam, if I may assist with the legal work for the foundation, I will do so gladly. It will be a way to atone for my misdeeds." She smiled faintly. "Thank you, cousin. Your cooperation means much." Lucien stepped forward with a small box of polished mahogany. "As an additional safeguard, I propose that this box house the cylinders and crank locked with 2 keys, one held by you, madam, and one by Monsieur Duval. That way, no one, person can misuse them again." Poirot nodded, pleased at the gesture. "Très ingénieux. 2 keys, 2 keepers. A perfect symbol of shared responsibility." He took the box, smoothing its lacquer. "I shall have the box inscribed, 'Voices of the Past, preserved, not played.'" Outside, the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9, its tones resonant and unthreatening. Madame Baudouin sighed, as though releasing a burden she had borne for months. Armand placed his key into Lucien's hand, and then accepted his own from Madame. The cylinders, once sources of terror, now lay quietly within their new sanctuary. Poirot watched the exchange, his small grey cells humming with satisfaction. "Now, we must turn our attention to the legacy you wish to build. A foundation, orphanage, hospital, perhaps even a scholarship in Etienne's name, will transform this old house's shadows into light." He looked to Lucien. "Will you arrange for the appropriate donors' records and commemorative plaques in the manor chapel?" "Certainly, monsieur," Lucien replied respectfully. And so, with every device dismantled and every ruse revealed, Ashbourne Manor began to feel like a home once more, rather than a stage for whispers and hidden machinery. Madame Baudouin, her mourning tempered by purpose, felt the old warmth return to her heart. Armand, humbled yet determined, set about making amends. Lucien, ever steadfast, ensured the estate's daily rhythms resumed their quiet order. Poirot lingered by the window, surveying the courtyard where children played in the snow, their laughter bright against the winter light. He felt that final thread of deceit had been severed, and in its place a new cord of hope and charity now bound the family together. The case of the sealed study's ghostly voice had ended, not with punishment alone, but with restoration. And, goodwill. He touched his hat respectfully to Madame Baudouin. "Madam, may I stay for tea and share in the first meeting of your foundation committee?" She smiled, genuine and warm. "It would be an honour, Monsieur Poirot." Thus, with snow sparkling like diamonds outside, they repaired to the drawing-room, no longer seekers of truth alone, but fellow architects of a brighter future born from the echoes of the past. Chapter 7. A warning in the garden-room. The drawing-room's hearth was alive with crackling flames as Madame Baudouin, Hercule Poirot, Armand Duval, and Lucien gathered around a low table set for tea. The ivory porcelain cups bore the Baudouin crest, and a delicate silver tray held buttery scones, lemon curd, and petit fours. Outside, the courtyard garden was dusted with snow, but inside, warmth and purpose filled the air. "Sister Anne," Madame Baudouin began, addressing the kindly nun who sat to her left. "Thank you for joining our foundation committee. Your work with the orphanage in Marseille inspired me to create this trust." Sister Anne offered a gentle smile. "It is my privilege, madame. Any support for children in need is a blessing. I have brought drafts of the mission statement and a list of local charities to consider." Dr. Whitaker, the manor's physician and a board member, leaned forward. "I propose we allocate 1/3 of the initial endowment to medical care, equipment for the new wing at St. Giles's Hospital, and the remainder split between scholarships and child welfare programs." Armand consulted his notes. "If we invest wisely, the capital can grow. I recommend establishing an investment committee to oversee the trust's assets, ensuring long-term viability." Lucien placed a steaming pot on the table. "Tea? Anyone? Lady Grey to fortify our deliberations?" As each filled their cup, Poirot observed the room with satisfaction. The project had real momentum, far beyond the personal dramas that had haunted Ashbourne Manor only days ago. Madame Baudouin sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Before we finalize allocations, I have one more item. Last night I received this." She paused and lifted a folded note from the table. The paper's edges were jagged, as though torn hastily. The committee leaned in. Poirot took the note, gently, and read. "Beware the voice that sleeps in walls, your grief unweaves. Cease your giving. Let the past rest, or the secrets of Ashbourne shall awaken once more." A hush fell. Sister Anne's cheeks paled. Dr. Whitaker exchanged a glance with Armand. Lucien's hand trembled as he reached for his cup. Madame Baudouin's voice shook. "It arrived by post this morning. No signature. I found it slipped under my door." Poirot folded the note with care. A threat, clearly designed to intimidate. But from whom? And why issue it now that the cylinders and playback devices are secured in the East Wing storage box? Armand stood. "I cannot think of anyone with motive to oppose this foundation. It will honour my late cousin's memory and benefit the community." Dr. Whitaker frowned. "Yet the estate's distant relatives may covet those funds. They could see this as diverting fortune away from potential heirs." "Possible," Poirot agreed, "but they lack intimate knowledge of the manor's hidden devices or last week's events. Whoever wrote this knows of the ghostly voice and wishes it revived." Sister Anne laid a comforting hand on Madame's arm. "Madame, do you suspect anyone here at the manor?" Madame Baudouin shook her head. "No, but the handwriting feels strangely familiar." Poirot studied the note. The slanted script curved elegantly, with pronounced loops on the ARL and H. A handwriting sample came to mind. Armand's signature on the trust documents. Poirot looked up, eyes gentle but probing. "May I compare this to your cousin's handwriting, madam?" She retrieved the signed investment agreement. Poirot placed them side by side beneath the lamp's glow. The loops matched, the same flourish on the lowercase a, and the distinctive cross on the T. Armand's face drained of colour. He cleared his throat. I wanted time to adjust before the world knew of my designs for the foundation. I only meant a polite warning, not a threat." Madame's eyes filled with tears of disappointment. "Armand, this foundation is bigger than property or pride. Do you truly not see how this threatens everything we have strived for?" Armand bowed his head. "Forgive me, Simone. I was afraid straying from the legal path would diminish my standing. I never intended harm." He met Poirot's gaze. Can this trust survive if its own guardian betrays its purpose? Poirot folded the note gently and handed it to Madame. Trust, like the past, once betrayed, demands restoration through honesty. You will proceed openly, and Armand must atone by revealing his misstep to the board. He rose and offered, his arm to Madame. "Shall we step into the garden for fresh air and kinder thoughts?" As they left the warmth of the drawing-room, snowflakes drifted around them, blanketing the estate's secrets with a promise of renewal. And in that quiet hush, Madame Baudouin felt the threat dissolve, replaced by a determination that the voice in the sealed study would never again speak in anger or fear. Chapter 8. The Lost Son's Testament. The manor clock in the hallway struck 2, as Poirot, Madame Baudouin, and Lucien gathered once more in the study. The fire had burned low, and the room felt cavernous in the hush of night. Candles flickered in their brass sconces, casting uneasy shadows on the walls that had so recently trembled with phantom whispers. "Monsieur Poirot," Simone said softly, "I still feel unsettled. Though Armand's warning was revealed, I cannot shake the sense that truth remains half buried here." Poirot nodded, his moustaches twitching with quiet determination. "You are correct, madame. Even as we guard the cylinders, the heart of this mystery may yet lie hidden beneath these boards." He knelt beside the parquet at the corner where Lucienne had first uncovered the phonograph cylinder. The seams of the floorboards were tight, but a slight discoloration in the wood grain caught his eye. "Lucienne, bring your mirror and that small chisel you carry for emergencies," Poirot instructed. The butler fetched the tools from his coat pocket and knelt in deference. With delicate taps he pried at the edge of the plank. It creaked but held fast. At Poirot's signal, Lucien levered gently until the board yielded with a soft groan. Beneath lay a shallow cavity carved into the joists. Poirot shone a candle into the recess and retrieved a smaller dust-covered object, a leather-bound booklet, its cover brittle and cracked. He opened it with gloved hands and inspected the faded ink. "A diary," he murmured, "and not Etienne's, but a child's." Madame's breath caught. "Charles's, but he died as an infant." Poirot leafed through the pages. These entries date from 1909 to 1913. They speak of hiding in this very study, of listening to father's voice, of secrets meant to be kept until the child was grown. He read aloud a few shaky lines. I hide here in the dark when mother and Armand argue. He says she must never speak of me, but I see her tears. If father knew I lived, he would call me to his arms. Simone's hand flew to her mouth. Tears glimmered in her eyes. Charles, he must have lived longer than I remembered. I must have blocked it out. Poirot closed the diary gently. This is the missing piece. A hidden testament proving that Charles survived infancy. Long, enough to record his own existence. He pressed his finger to a date at the top of the page. August 14th, 1913. He was at least 3 years old when last he wrote. Lucien glanced at Madame, sorrow in his expression. Madame, forgive me. When I found the diary, I did not realize its importance. I feared more scandal and tucked it away. Simone turned to Poirot, voice trembling yet resolved. Monsieur, what must I do? If this diary is proof of a living heir, the entire inheritance could shift. Poirot rose, the diary cradled in his hand like a precious relic. Madame, we must verify whether Charles indeed survived beyond these entries, perhaps medical, records in the village, or staff testimonies. But first, the diary must be authenticated. We will send it to the parish register and Dr. Whitaker for confirmation of its author. He paused, meeting her gaze. Your son's voice has called from beyond the grave once more. But now it brings hope rather than menace. Simone nodded, wiping a tear. Yes, I will face the past this time. Poirot smiled gently. Courage, madame, is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. Replaced the plank, sealing the diary back into its hiding place until proper authorities could handle it. As they straightened the room, Lucien fetched fresh kindling for the hearth and stoked the embers into a warm glow. Outside, a sudden gust rattled the mullioned windows, as though the manor itself exhaled. Poirot stood by the desk, diary in hand, and closed his eyes in thought. We have uncovered the truth at last. The voice in the sealed study speaks of love and loss, of secrets held too long. Tomorrow we shall set the matter right, restoring Madame's legacy, and perhaps giving her son a place in history. Madame Baudouin approached, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for guiding me back to Charles. He inclined his head. It is always an honor, madame, to serve justice, whether in life or memory. As the bandische candles guttered and the manor settled into its deepest silence, Poirot allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The sealed study would rest no more upon falsehoods and tragedies. In its boards lay the legacy of a mother's love and a child's whispered truth, finally brought to light. Chapter 9. The Search for the Lost Heir. The dawn light filtered through the frost-laced windows of Ashbourne Manor as Poirot, Madame Baudouin, and Lucien prepared to depart for the village of Greystone, where the parish register and Dr. Whitaker's former assistant awaited. A thin layer of snow muffled carriage wheels on the drive, and the breath of horses steamed in the crisp air. Poirot adjusted his scarf and surveyed the grand façade of the manor with satisfaction. At last they were closing in on the boy who had hidden in its shadows. Madam, Poirot said gently, today we give voice not to a phantom, but to your son's memory. We shall confirm Charles's fate and secure his rightful place in history. Simone Baudouin smiled, though her eyes glistened with both hope and apprehension. Yes, Monsieur Poirot, I long to know whether he truly lived beyond that secret diary. Lucien helped her into the carriage, wrapping her shawl carefully around her shoulders. Poirot mounted beside the coachman, tapping the reins. Greystone lies 7 miles east, past the stone bridge. The church hall opens at 10. Let us not tarry. The countryside glimmered under winter's spell, fields of white stretching towards distant woodlands. Along the way, Poirot reviewed the plan. First, inspect the parish baptismal and death records for any entry of Charles Baudouin after August 1913. Then, interview Mrs. Pembroke, the old caretaker of the Grey Friars Chapel, who remembered tending to Dr. Whitaker's practice. Finally, consult Fielding's ledgers for any mention of a burial at the family plot. They arrived at the small stone church just as the clock in the square chimed 10. Madame paused at the porch, steeling herself. Poirot offered his arm. "Courage, Madame," he murmured. "The truth is our ally." Inside, they found Mr. Aldridge, the parish clerk, seated at a long oak table strewn with parchment ledgers. His spectacles perched on the end of his nose, he greeted them with a courteous bow. "Monsieur Poirot, madame," he said, "I understand you seek entries concerning Charles Baudouin." "Precisely," Poirot replied. "We have records here from 1910 to 1920. Would you kindly show us any baptismal or burial entries under that name?" Mr. Aldridge turned to a thick volume and flicked through pages with methodical care. At last he stopped. "I have one entry. Here, Charles Etienne Baudouin, son of Etienne and Simone Baudouin, baptized August 14th, 1909. No burial entry follows for that individual." Madame's breath caught. "No burial," she whispered. Poirot inclined his head. "That suggests Charles did not die in infancy, but lived beyond that date." Mr. Aldridge continued searching. "I see no further mention of the name in either register. The absence of a burial suggests he either left the parish or died elsewhere." "Thank you," Poirot said, standing. "Now, would you direct us to Mrs. Pembroke's residence? She once worked alongside Dr. Whitaker." The clerk pointed down the lane to a half-timbered cottage. Soon, Madame Baudouin, Poirot, and Lucien stood before an elderly woman, her stooped frame bent over a steaming kettle on the hearth. Mrs. Pembroke looked up with mild surprise. "Monsieur Poirot and Madame Baudouin," she said, "it's been many years. You seek information on young Charles?" Simone nodded, voice hushed. "Yes, Mrs. Pembroke. My son, Charles, he may have survived past childhood. I found his diary hidden in the manor." Mrs. Pembroke's eyes softened. "Ah, dear child, I remember him well." She fetched a writing desk and leafed through a small notebook. "Dr. Whitaker visited my cottage in 1914, inquiring about Charles's health. The lad had measles, they said, but recovered swiftly. I noted in my diary that the boy stayed with his nurse for convalescence, then returned to his mother." Madame's hand trembled on Poirot's arm. "So he lived?" "Yes, madame." Mrs. Pembroke smiled gently. "He thrived until the war reached our village. They evacuated children in 1915. Some were sent to London, others to Canada. I fear little Charles was among those destined for safety overseas. Poirot glanced at Lucien. Then our next step is to trace evacuation records. The Red Cross archives may hold his passage manifest. Simone's eyes shone with gratitude. Thank you, Mrs. Pembroke. You have given me hope. They departed the cottage, hearts buoyed by the discovery. As they returned to the carriage, Poirot looked to Madame Baudouin. Your son's testament is no longer confined to hidden floorboards. It lives in these records and memories. With the Red Cross documents, you will establish his fate and, whether living or lost, honour his place in your legacy. The carriage rattled over the stone bridge as the sun dipped low. Madame clutched the leather diary to her chest. Lucien sat quietly, unwavering in his duty, and Poirot, eyes alight with satisfaction, murmured, onward to the next chapter of this extraordinary tale. Thus, the search for the lost heir continued, guided by dusty ledgers, kindly recollections, and the indomitable spirit of a mother determined to reclaim her son's story. Chapter 10. The Archives of Hope. The following morning, Ashbourne Manor stood silent under a pale winter sun as Hercule Poirot, Madame Baudouin, and Lucien prepared to journey to London. Their destination was the British Red Cross Archives on Grosvenor Road, an austere Georgian building whose unmarked entrance belied the treasures within. Poirot fastened his overcoat, smoothing the lapels, while Madame Baudouin cradled the leather-bound diary like a talisman. Lucien, ever discreet, carried a small valise containing the parish register copy and Mrs. Pembroke's notebook. Madame, Poirot said as he helped her into the carriage, today we seek confirmation not only of existence, but of passage, whether Charles Etienne Baudouin survived the evacuation and found refuge abroad. Her gaze was steadfast. I will know at last where to place my flowers on his grave, or how to welcome him home. The carriage jostled through the quiet lanes, the muffled sound of hooves echoing against brick walls. As London's grand terraces gave way to the crowded streets of Belgravia, Madame Baudouin's hopeful resolve was tempered by anxiety. Poirot, observing her expression, offered reassurance. Courage, madame. The truth may be unexpected, but it will bring peace. They arrived. Before a discreet iron gate, a small brass plaque read simply, British Red Cross, Archives. Inside, a hushed corridor led to a reading room where a bespectacled archivist awaited. He bowed politely as they entered. Good morning, Monsieur Poirot, Madame Baudouin. You requested to view the 1915 evacuation manifests? Poirot produced a letter of introduction from the Director General. Precisely. We seek records of Belgian and British child evacuees, specifically any listing of Charles Etienne Baudouin or similar variants. The archivist led them through rows of iron-bound volumes, the musty scent of old paper thick in the air. He drew 2 ledgers from a high shelf, the Departures London, June to August 1915, and the Arrivals Halifax, Nova Scotia, July to September 1915. He placed them on a central table. Here, he said, opening the departure register. The script was tight and careful, each line recording child name, age, companion organization, and destination ship. Poirot leaned forward, guiding Madame Baudouin's trembling finger down the page. Baudouin, Charles E., age 5. Accompanied by Miss L. Gibbons, Belgian Refugee Committee. SS Caledonia, sailed 12th August 1915. Madame's hand flew to her mouth. He was 5, not the toddler I feared. Remarkable, Poirot murmured. He sailed under the auspices of Belgian relief, likely misclassified to ensure passage. He closed the ledger and retrieved the arrival volume. Turning the pages, he sought the corresponding date range. Soon he found Caledonia arrived, Halifax, 1st September 1915. Below, in smaller script, Baudouin, Charles E., age 5, transferred to Miss Gibbons, onward to Quebec. Monsieur, Lucien said softly, there is a note here. Temporary guardian, Lady Harcourt. Perhaps an aristocratic sponsor. Poirot's eyes brightened. Excellent. Now we track the onward journey. He turned to the archivist. May we consult passenger lists for the Montreal-Le Havre return voyages in 1917? Some children returned after the war's end. The archivist nodded and produced microfilm reels. Together they projected the images onto a small screen. Poirot examined each line with meticulous care until at last he found Steamer Méditerranée, departed 3rd of May 1917, Baudouin, C.E., at age 7, accompanied by Lady Harcourt, disembarked Le Havre, 20th May 1917. Madame's eyes shone with tears of relief. He returned to France, to England, and then Poirot tapped the reel knob. There, next entry. Harcourt, lady, guardian of child, presented at Château de Vaucelles. He looked up. An estate near Amiens. Perhaps Lady Harcourt settled Charles there. Madame rose, voice trembling with gratitude. I must go to Amiens. I must see if he remains alive, if anyone remembers him. Poirot offered his arm. And I shall accompany you, madame. We will recover every trace of your son's journey. Lucien gathered their documents and closed the ledgers. May I arrange passage to France? He asked. Oui, Poirot replied, but first I shall write to Lady Harcourt, announcing our intention and requesting a meeting. He removed a stationery sheet from his coat and dipped his pen. As he wrote, Madame Baudouin watched the pale pencil strokes form her son's name on the page, every letter a step closer to reunion or final farewell. Outside the archives, quiet chamber London bustled unaware of the mother's quest unfolding within. At last, Poirot signed and folded the letter. There, a courteous request dispatched to the lady's estate. Now we await her reply, and the next chapter in the story of Charles-Étienne Baudouin. In that moment, fear and uncertainty gave way to purpose. The lost heir's testament had crossed oceans and borders. Soon it would reach the hands that had harboured him. And Poirot, ever vigilant, knew that whether the son's voice was alive or no more, justice and a mother's love would not be denied. Chapter 11. The invitation to Vaucelles. A week later, on a crisp March morning, Madame Baudouin and Hercule Poirot stood once more in the drawing-room of Ashbourne Manor. The sunlight slanted through the tall windows onto the Persian rug, illuminating the silver tray of tea laid out for their journey. Lucien, ever discreet, brought in Madame's coat and a travelling satchel. Monsieur Poirot, Simone said, smoothing the front of her travelling dress, I received Lady Harcourt's reply last night. She has graciously invited us to Château de Vaucelles this coming Thursday, at midday precisely. Poirot nodded, folding his napkin with deliberate care. Excellent. Her tone is polite but formal. She no doubt wishes to prepare for our arrival. She mentions that Charles was a lively child, with a fondness for the estate's gardens, and that his portrait hangs in the grand salon. Simone's breath caught. A portrait! At last I may glimpse my son's face as he grew. They departed by carriage for the railway station, the anticipation mounting with each passing mile. Poirot's keen eye noted the shifting landscape, the neat fields of Normandy giving way to wooded glens as they approached Amiens. At the station, they found a waiting carriage bearing the Harcourt family crest, a silver falcon upon a field of blue. The drive to Château de Vaucelles wound through rolling pastures dotted with early spring blooms. Black wrought-iron gates swung open to admit them, and a gravel path led through formal lawns to the chateau's front portico. Tall chimneys and Gothic windows gave the stone facade an air of restrained grandeur. A single figure stood beneath the porte-cochère, an elderly housekeeper in a sombre gown, her posture rigid with propriety. "Madame Baudouin? Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her voice soft with a faint accent. "I am Mademoiselle Dubois, Lady Harcourt's housekeeper. Her ladyship regrets that she is indisposed, but she has arranged for me to assist you during your visit." Poirot bowed. "Thank you, Mademoiselle Dubois. We understand, and I trust you will guide us with your lady's instructions." Mademoiselle Dubois led them through a lofty entrance hall, adorned with hunting trophies and ancestral arms. Tapestries depicted chivalric scenes, and oil portraits of stern-faced Harcourt forebears lined the walls. At the end of the hall, arches opened onto the grand salon, whose vault soared overhead. A marble fireplace stood cold at one end, and opposite it, suspended in an ornate gilt frame, hung the portrait of a small boy. "Madam," Poirot murmured as they approached. Simone's hand trembled as she stepped forward. The painting showed a cherubic child of 7 or 8, curly-haired and clad in a sailor suit, seated on a crimson settee in what appeared to be the chateau's rose garden. His dark eyes brimmed with curiosity, and a slight smile tugged at his lips. Simone gasped. "Charles, it must be him." Tears glistened in her eyes. "He looks so much like his father." Poirot placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Indeed, madam. Notice the shape of his jaw, and the curve of his eyelids. A perfect match to the previous photograph in your locket." He studied the signature at the painting's lower corner. "Painted by Éloise Martel, 1916. Mademoiselle Dubois cleared her throat. Lady Harcourt commissioned the portrait after young Baudouin completed his convalescence here following the 1915 evacuation. He remained under her patronage until she entrusted him to a boarding school near Paris in 1918. Simone drew a sharp breath. "A boarding school? Do you know which one?" "Madam, Lady Harcourt received his final school report and medical clearance in March of 1919, at which point she arranged for his passage to England with a tutor. After that, correspondence ceased. She assumed his father or legal guardian had reclaimed him." Poirot's moustaches twitched. But with the war's end and the dissolution of Lady Harcourt's trust, the boy's papers may have been misplaced among post-war chaos. He turned to Mademoiselle Dubois. Might there be any surviving letters or documents in the chateau's archives, tuition bills, guardianship records, anything bearing his name? The housekeeper inclined her head. "Yes, monsieur. Lady Harcourt had the chateau's steward keep a ledger of all charitable charges. It should be in the library's restricted section." They followed Mademoiselle Dubois down a narrow corridor to a panelled library whose 60-foot shelves were lined with leather-bound tomes. At the far end, beneath a brass lamp, stood a heavy oak desk. Mademoiselle inserted a key into a locked drawer and withdrew a ledger stamped Harcourt Estates, Charitable Disbursements, 1915-1922. Poirot flipped through the pages until he found a faded entry in early 1918, March 5, 1918, tuition for Master C. E. Baudouin, at Institut Maupassant, Paris, 250 francs. Simone placed her hand over her heart. Institut Maupassant. He was in Paris. Poirot continued down the ledger, pausing at another entry in September 1919. September 12th, 1919. Passage to London for Master C. E. Baudouin. Guardian, Sir Reginald Harcourt. 3rd class, SS Dominion. Madame's eyes filled with tears of hope. He made it to London. Finally, Poirot said, we have clear proof of his movements. Now we must trace Sir Reginald Harcourt's estate and discover what became of Charles after his arrival in England. They left Château de Vaucelles with the ledger in hand, hearts buoyed by each new discovery. As the carriage rolled away, Poirot glanced back at the grand silhouette of the chateau against a cloudless sky. The trail of the lost heir led onward to schools, to guardians, and perhaps to the man Charles had become, and with each step the little grey cells marched closer to the mother's reunion at last. Chapter 12. Shadows of the Dominion. A week after their visit to Vaucelles, Hercule Poirot, Madame Baudouin, and Lucien found themselves once more crossing the Channel by steamer. The grey waters of the English Channel churning beneath the SS Dominion's steel hull. Winter storms had passed, leaving behind a crisp breeze that sought to tug at their coats as they disembarked in London's fog-shrouded docks. Madame Baudouin clutched the leather ledger as though it were a lifeline, its pages bearing the first definitive proof of her son's post-war life. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly, we now know Charles landed in London under Sir Reginald Harcourt's guardianship. But where did he go from there? And who tended to his welfare once he reached these shores? Poirot adjusted his bowler hat. We shall start at the Harcourt family office, madam. Sir Reginald's estate was managed by Messrs. Eddington and Co., solicitors specialising in post-war trusts. Their offices lie in Lincoln's Inn Fields, an area of grand Georgian terraces repurposed for law firms. They summoned a hansom cab, Lucien providing precise directions. Soon they drew up before an austere stone building, its doorway flanked by Ionic columns. Inside, a young clerk received their letter of introduction from Lady Harcourt. Behind a mahogany desk, he reviewed the ledger copy, and after a discreet nod, escorted them into a wood-panelled conference room. Madame, the clerk began, the Harcourt records indicate that Sir Reginald retained Messrs. Eddington to oversee Charles E. Baudouin's guardianship in London. He provided accommodation at 14 Albany Street, near Regent's Park, and funded his schooling at St. Vincent's, an Anglican preparatory school. I can retrieve the relevant file for your inspection. He departed and returned within minutes, carrying a sea-green folder stamped with the Eddington seal. Poirot opened it with reverent care. Esther lay correspondence between Sir Reginald and his solicitor, account ledgers, and quarterly reports from St. Vincent's headmaster, Reverend Montague. Reverend Montague, Poirot read aloud, "Writes here that Master Baudouin arrived in October 1919 at age 7 and displayed a keen aptitude for Latin and mathematics. He excelled at cricket and was noted for his gentle manners." Madame's lips trembled. "He thrived. He grew to be a bright boy." Poirot continued through the documents, pausing at a brief note dated June 1921. "Our pupil, Charles Baudouin, has been moved to Chichester House, a boarding establishment, under Miss Langley's care. Fees to be paid quarterly. Guardian's funds sufficient." Lucien frowned. "Chichester House, is that part of the school or a private boarding house?" "Ah, good question," Poirot said. "We must visit both St. Vincent's and Chichester House to trace Charles's whereabouts." He closed the folder and handed it back. "We thank you for your assistance. May we return to review any additional correspondence?" The clerk bowed. "Of course, monsieur. I shall leave the folder here for you." They stepped back into the crisp London air. The afternoon, sky pale behind the smoke of countless chimneys. "Let us proceed to Regent's Park," Poirot suggested. "The school is but a short walk away." Within half an hour, they stood before St. Vincent's Preparatory, a red brick building crowned by arched windows and ivy-clad turrets. A stout porter introduced himself and led them inside, where Reverend Montague awaited them in his oak-panelled parlour. His kindly face lit with recognition at the mention of Charles's name. "Madam," he said warmly, "I recall your son well. After his transfer to Chichester House in 1921, reports ceased here. Miss Langley's establishment lay beyond my purview, but she assured me that Charles prospered." He produced a volume of alumni notes and opened to the Chichester House entry. It confirmed Charles's attendance from June 1921 to December 1923, after which he was recorded as having left in good standing to join his guardian's London household. Madame's hand flew to her heart. His guardian's household? That would be Sir Reginald's London home. He must have lived there as a youth. Poirot nodded. "We must find Sir Reginald himself, or his heirs. Perhaps the London Directory will list his residence." Lucien consulted a small notebook. "I have here a reference, 82 Park Lane, Sir Reginald Harcourt, Bart, KCB. Park Lane was a boulevard of grand townhouses, their facades facing Hyde Park's broad expanse. A black-lamed footman answered their knock at number 82 and informed them that Sir Reginald's daughter, Lady Marston, now resided there. She would receive them in the morning. That evening, the three returned to Ashbourne Manor's London lodgings, the city's lights sparkling like distant stars. Madame Baudouin paced the sitting-room, her thoughts on the son she had nearly lost, and was now closer than ever to finding. Poirot watched her with sympathy. "Tomorrow, madame, we shall meet Lady Marston and learn of Charles's life after childhood. Whether he remained in England or ventured abroad to work and marry, we will locate him." Madame turned to him, eyes bright with resolve. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot, whatever has become of Charles Etienne Baudouin, I will see him again and restore his place in our family's history." And so, as London settled into its nightly hush, the mother's quest continued, a trail through directories, parlours, and memories, all guided by Poirot's indefatigable determination and the promise of a long-awaited reunion. Chapter 13. The Daughter's Revelation. Morning light filtered through the lace curtains of Sir Reginald Harcourt's Park Lane townhouse, as Poirot, Madame Baudouin, and Lucien stepped into the grand drawing-room. High ceilings echoed with the soft ticking of an ormolu clock, and walls, lined with oil portraits, bore witness to generations of Harcourts. A discreet footman announced, "Lady Marston," and a poised young woman entered, her bearing noble yet warm. "Madame Baudouin, Monsieur Poirot, welcome," she said, extending a slender hand to Simone. "I am Eleanor Marston, née Harcourt. My father trusted me to assist in your search for Charles." She beckoned them to seats upholstered in damask silk. "Pray, tell me how I can help." Madame Baudouin inclined her head. "Thank you, Lady Marston. We know my son, Charles Etienne Baudouin, arrived here under your grandfather's care in 1919, was educated at St. Vincent's and Chichester House, and then entered Sir Reginald's London household in December 1923. After that, all trace of him vanished. We seek to learn whether he continued here, married, or perhaps left England." Lady Marston poured tea, her movements graceful. "My father spoke of Charles as a beloved ward and companion to me in childhood. We often walked the gardens together, though he was older by a few years. After I married in 1930, Charles pursued studies at Oxford, reading modern languages. He was fluent in French and English." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Do you have records, letters, university testimonials, perhaps a photograph?" Lady Marston nodded and rose to retrieve a leather-bound portfolio from a side table. Returning, she laid open a folder of correspondence. "Here is a letter from Magdalen College, Oxford, dated October 1931, confirming his admission to the Modern Languages programme." She handed Poirot the letter. "Dear Sir Reginald, we are pleased to confirm that Master Charles Baudouin will join the Honours School of Modern Languages this Michaelmas term. We anticipate his academic success. Yours faithfully, Provost, Magdalen College." Madame's eyes glistened. He became Charles Baudouin at Oxford, no longer a lost ward, but a scholar. "Indeed," Lady Marston continued, spreading out a black-and-white photograph. It depicted a tall, slender young man in mortarboard and gown, standing before the college chapel. This is him in 1933. He graduated with second-class honours in 1934, then joined the Foreign Office in 1935 as a junior attaché, stationed first in Brussels, then Geneva. Poirot took the photograph. Brussels and Geneva, perhaps the League of Nations. Do you know his later postings? Yes, Eleanor said. During the late 1930s he served at the British delegation to the League in Geneva. I have his service record here. She produced another document, a diplomatic file stamped Foreign Office Personnel Records. Poirot and Madame read the entries. 35, 37. Attaché, British Legation, Brussels, 1937-39. Third Secretary. British Delegation to the League of Nations, Geneva, 1939. Returned to London. Secured a commission in the Intelligence Corps, 1941. Reported missing in action during the Dunkirk evacuation. Officially declared missing. Presumed captured. Madame clutched the file. Missing in action. Her voice trembled. So he may still be alive, held as a prisoner of war. Lady Marston laid a comforting hand on Simone's. When the war ended, we searched Red Cross records for Charles, but no further listings appeared. My father placed his affairs in trust, assuming Charles would return if alive. When years passed without news, he presumed Charles perished in captivity. Poirot's eyes sparkled with resolve. Then our next step is to consult post-war prisoner of war, repatriation records and International Committee of the Red Cross Archives. If Charles survived Dunkirk, he may have been held in a camp in Germany or Italy before liberation. Agreed, Madame said, regaining composure. He deserves the truth, and a chance for us to speak again. Eleanor rose and collected the documents. I will accompany you to the Red Cross Archive in Geneva or London, wherever you prefer. My father left instructions for Lady Marston to continue any search efforts. Poirot smiled. Madame, it seems the journey that began with a phantom voice has brought us to a very real and noble life. Whether Charles lives or has passed, we will uncover his fate. Lucien bowed respectfully. I stand ready to assist, Madame. Eleanor turned to Simone. Your son was not forgotten here. I will help you bring his story to its rightful conclusion. Madame grasped Eleanor's hand. Thank you. You have given me more than information. You have given me hope. As they departed the townhouse, documents in hand and determination, in their hearts Poirot reflected that no study, however sealed, could contain the echoes of love and loss. The mother's quest would continue, this time toward Geneva's archives, where the final chapter of Charles Etienne Baudouin's story awaited revelation. Chapter 14. The Search at the Geneva Archives. A week later, the crisp spring air of Geneva carried the promise of new beginnings as Hercule Poirot, Madame Baudouin, Lady Marston and Lucien arrived at the International Committee of the Red Cross Archives on Avenue de la Paix. The grand façade of the Palais Wilson, its white stone, gleaming against a bright sky, seemed a fitting vessel for the hopes of a mother seeking her son. Crisp banners bearing the Red Cross emblem fluttered overhead, and the steady hum of diplomats in the nearby League of Nations corridors lent the city an air of solemn purpose. Madame, Poirot murmured as they stepped into the marble-floored vestibule, today we pursue the final threads of your son's fate. These archives hold the scattered testimonies of thousands who suffered and survived the war. Let us find Charles's record among them. A courteous clerk directed them to a reading room lined with tall shelves of bound registers. At a long oak table, a senior archivist awaited, his spectacles perched low on his nose and a patient expression on his face. He greeted them in measured English. Madame Baudouin, Monsieur Poirot, Lady Marston, we have prepared the POW repatriation registers for the years 1940 through 1946. Please follow me. They followed him into a hushed chamber where dusty ledgers lay open on glass-topped tables. Each volume bore a date range. Prisoners liberated. Western Europe, 1945. Repatriation lists. Spring, 1946. And so forth. Poirot's grey cells had already plotted their path. First review the lists of those repatriated from German camps in late 1945, then cross-check names and service numbers against the Foreign Office file they had retrieved in London. The archivist pointed to the first ledger. Here are the names recorded upon arrival in Switzerland for medical evacuation or release. The entries are alphabetical by surname. Poirot leaned over the pages, magnifying glass in hand. Baudouin, Baudouin. He scanned. There, Entry 1063. Baudouin, Charles E., Service Number 76214, Intelligence Corps. Arrived Geneva, 12th November 1945. Condition, good. Madam's hand flew to her mouth. Lady Marston closed her eyes in relief. Lucien held the leather diary, tight to his chest. Service number matches the Foreign Office file. Poirot continued. He survived captivity and was released at war's end. The archivist nodded. We have the camp of origin, Stalag 29 B, in German-occupied Poland. And a note that he served as Red Cross interpreter during internment due to his fluency in French and German. Poirot's moustaches twitched with admiration. He aided his fellow prisoners, a testament to his character. He turned to Madame. Mademoiselle Baudouin, your son lives. Tears rolled down Simone's cheeks as she closed the ledger. He lives! But perhaps we should confirm his condition after repatriation, Poirot said. Let us consult the registration cards. He signalled the archivist. Madame, the next volume contains individual case files. The archivist retrieved a thick binder and located the card for Charles E. Baudouin. It bore his photograph. A handsome man of 30, dark-haired and clear-eyed, in civilian clothes. The card noted his date of birth, baptism details, and service record. Beneath, a terse update. Discharged from ICRC care, January 1946. Returned to London. Rejoined Foreign Office. Deployed to Paris, 1947. Lady Marston cried softly. He went back to diplomacy. Indeed, Poirot said, and his final address is listed here. 17 Rue de Rivoli, Paris, British Embassy Quarter. Contact through the UK legation. Madame laid a trembling hand on the card. Paris. He built a life there. Poirot closed the binder gently. Your son's journey. Evacuated as a boy, schooled in England, served his country in peace and war, endured hardship as a prisoner, and returned to his calling. A remarkable life. Simone's voice broke. And now I must see him. I must speak with him face to face. Very well, Poirot said. I have a letter of introduction prepared from Lady Marston and the Foreign Office, requesting audience at the British Embassy in Paris. With this, you can request an appointment with Mr. Baudouin. Lady Marston produced the folded stationery, and Poirot handed it to Madame. She traced the lines of ink with her fingertip, imagining her son reading her words. Thank you, she whispered, to you all. Outside, the flags of the Red Cross fluttered in the breeze as they left the archives. Lucien opened the carriage door for Madame, and Lady Marston paused on the steps, offering a gentle smile. Your son awaits, Simone. May your reunion bring you the peace you deserve. As the carriage rolled through Geneva streets toward the Gare Cornavin, Madame Baudouin folded the letter close to her heart. The voice that had once haunted a sealed study had become a living presence, an echo, fulfilled across decades and borders, and with Poirot's steadfast guidance, she would soon embrace her lost son, at last closing the final chapter of their extraordinary journey. Chapter 15. Reunion on the Seine. A pale spring dawn greeted Madame Baudouin as she stepped from the Hôtel de Crillon onto the Quai des Tuileries. Paris lay before her in soft pastel light, the Seine shimmering beneath ornate bridges, and the city's gentle hum stirring her heart. Clutched in her gloved hand was the letter from Poirot and Lady Marston, bearing the Foreign Office seal. Today, At the British Embassy on Rue Faubourg Saint-Honoré, she would at last meet her son. Hercule Poirot and Lucien accompanied her along the Grand Boulevard. Poirot's moustaches held their usual quiet confidence, while Lucien's calm demeanour offered silent support. "Madame," Poirot said, "your courage has brought you here. In moments you shall hear Charles's voice in person, no longer a phantom echo, but your living child." Simone nodded, her throat tight with anticipation. "May God grant me the strength to speak with him." They arrived at the embassy's iron gates, where a uniformed aide recognized Poirot's letter and ushered them through marbled halls to a stately reception room. Portraits of British diplomats lined the walls, and a polished oak table held fresh flowers in cobalt vases. An embassy official greeted them with a respectful bow and led Madame Baudouin into a smaller adjoining salon. A tall figure stood by the window, gazing out at the river. He wore a dark suit, his posture straight yet relaxed. When he turned, their eyes met, hers wide with tears, his with startled recognition. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. "Mother!" His voice was low, thick with emotion. "Charles!" Simone whispered, releasing her hand to cover her mouth as tears spilled past her lashes. She advanced, each step a lifetime of longing, and he closed the distance, enveloping her in a trembling embrace. Their tears mingled, her breath catching against his shoulder. Lucien and Poirot lingered respectfully by the door, their faces soft with satisfaction. At last, Simone drew back, holding Charles at arm's length to study him. He was a man now, tall and lean, dark hair flecked with silver at the temples, and eyes that mirrored her own. "My son," she repeated, voice cracking. "I thought I had lost you forever." He wiped her cheek gently. "I feared I was forgotten, yet I have remembered you every day." His accent blended French warmth with English restraint. "When I saw your name on that letter, hope returned." Poirot stepped forward with a gentle cough. "Madame, Monsieur, may I present—" He paused, then smiled. No introduction is needed when hearts already know one another. They seated themselves on silken chairs by the window. The aide left them in privacy, and Charles poured tea from a silver pot. Simone cradled her cup as though it were a precious relic. He spoke first, his tone steady. "After the embassy, I remained in Paris at the Quai d'Orsay from 1947 until last year. I married in 1950 and have 2 daughters, Isabelle and Marguerite." Madame's hand flew to her mouth. "Granddaughters!" Joy and surprise warred in her eyes. "You have a family?" Charles nodded, voice gentle. "A wonderful one. Isabelle is 10, Marguerite 7. They know of you, grand-mère." He beamed. "They have drawn your portrait and ask when they may meet you." Tears of pride shone in Simone's eyes. "Oh, my darlings!" She folded her hands. "I shall visit if you wish." He clasped her hands. "I wish it more than anything." They spoke of his years in Geneva, the work he did interpreting for POWs, and the quiet promise he made to repay the kindness shown to him. Simone shared stories of Ashbourne Manor, and of Poirot's brilliant interventions that reunited them. She spoke of her foundation, the children it served, and how she had named a wing in Charles's honour. At mention of Ashbourne, Charles's eyes glowed. "I long to return there, where I was born and where you waited for me." He paused. "Mother, I inherited the estate according to your wishes. I wish for it to remain a place of refuge, as you intended." Simone reached across to touch his hand. "Then we shall oversee it together, rebuilding its gardens, opening its doors to children." Poirot rose, adjusting his hat. "With your family reunited, Ashbourne Manor will shine brighter than ever." Lucien bowed and prepared to retrieve Madame's luggage. Outside, the city awakened. Church bells chimed. Vendors called out their wares, and the Seine glinted like liquid silver. As mother and son planned their journey home, Simone felt a profound peace settle in her soul. The voice that once haunted locked doors had led her through secret passages and foreign lands to this moment of joy. No longer an echo, Charles's presence was real and radiant, binding past and future in a tapestry of love that would endure for generations. Chapter 16. Homecoming and New Beginnings. The early summer sun poured golden light across the rolling lawns of Ashbourne Manor as the carriage carrying Madame Baudouin, Charles Poirot, Lady Marston and Lucien drew up beneath the colonnaded porte-cochère. The long drive had been filled with tender conversation. Charles recounting his life in Paris, Madame promising to show him every corner of the manor he had known only in memory, and Poirot quietly observing the reunion's gentle bloom. As the carriage door opened, Lucien stepped forward with a flourish, offering his hand first to Simone and then to her son. "Welcome home, madame. Welcome home, monsieur." His courteous bow carried the warmth of one who serves a family he has come to regard as his own. Charles paused on the top step, breathing in the familiar air that carried the fragrance of rose bushes and freshly turned earth. He straightened his shoulders and smiled at the great stone facade. "It is more beautiful than I remembered." Madame pressed a hand to her heart. "And I never dared hope I would see it again, with you by my side." Tears of joy glistened in her eyes. Poirot, ever attentive to propriety, tipped his bowler hat. "Monsieur Baudouin, the staff awaits your presence in the great hall. They have prepared a small gathering to mark your return and the opening of the foundation wing." Lady Marston linked her arm through Charles's. "Shall we, then? There are many rooms to explore, but first we honour tradition." They stepped into the grand entrance hall, where the assembled butler, maids, gardener, and a handful of invited villagers stood in respectful applause. At the centre of the hall, a satin ribbon stretched across an oak doorway, bearing the foundation's new name, the Charles Etienne Baudouin Wing for Children's Hope. A polished pair of scissors glinted in Lucien's hand. Simone approached the ribbon, her smile bright. Charles offered her the scissors, and she handed them back to him. With Lucien's gentle guidance, Charles cut the ribbon. The gathered guests cheered, and the great doors swung, open to reveal a sunlit corridor lined with children's portraits and colourful maps. At the far end stood a small stage, where Sister Anne and Dr. Whitaker waited with flowers. Sister Anne stepped forward and offered a blessing in both English and French, her gentle voice echoing in the vaulted corridor. "May this wing bring laughter where there was sorrow, learning where there was doubt, and hope where there was fear." The assembled staff and villagers bowed in unison. Dr. Whitaker followed with a brief speech. "On behalf of St. Giles's Hospital and the children of Ashbourne, I thank Madame and Monsieur Baudouin for their generosity. This wing will serve as a schoolroom, infirmary, and refuge, just as this manor has once again become a home." Then, with gracious tact, Poirot proposed a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, raising a crystal goblet of sparkling elderflower cordial, "and to the health, happiness, and prosperity of this family reunited. May the little grey cells of compassion guide us always." Glasses chimed softly, and Simone and Charles exchanged a smile, brimming with gratitude. The guests dispersed to tour the wing, leaving the immediate circle alone for a moment's peace. Madame and Charles walked side by side through the corridor, examining each painting and sketch created by local children in honour of the new wing. He paused before one depicting the manor's silhouette at sunset, and touched the artist's strokes with reverence. "I see your hand in these drafts, Mother," he said. "You taught me to appreciate beauty in memory and in creation." Chiquitith placed a hand on his arm. "And you have returned it tenfold. Ashbourne's legacy is yours now, Charles. Together we will ensure its future." Lucien approached, bowing slightly. "Dinner will be served in the dining hall. Afterward, Monsieur Baudouin may wish to speak with the groundskeeper about restoring the old rose terraces." Charles nodded. "Yes, I intend to plant a new row of hybrid tea roses, your favourite, Mother, in memory of our journey." Outside the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft apricot hues. From the far corner of the lawn, a group of orphans ran laughing, chasing a silver ball across the grass. Simone watched them, her eyes misty but shining. Poirot, observing from the arch of a marble column, allowed himself a small, contented sigh. His work was done. A mother reunited with her son, a manor restored, and a legacy reborn. Yet he knew that life's mysteries never truly end. They simply evolve into new stories. For now, though, he stepped forward and joined the family, ready to celebrate their triumph. Ashbourne Manor, once haunted by phantom voices and hidden machinery, now resonated with the laughter of children and the promise of hope. A fitting coda to a tale of secrets revealed and hearts restored. Chapter 17. Twilight Reflections Late. That evening, Ashbourne Manor's lamps glowed like watchful lanterns against the deepening sky. After dinner, the guests had departed, leaving only Madame Baudouin, Charles, Poirot, Lady Marston, and Lucien around the crackling hearth in the great drawing-room. The air was warm with the scent of burning wood, and the quiet satisfaction of a day's triumph. Madame Baudouin sat in an upholstered armchair, her shawl draped lightly over her shoulders. Charles reclined in the well-worn bergère across from her, a glass of claret resting on the low table between them. Poirot perched on a nearby settee, knitting his fingers together in contemplation, while Lady Marston stoked the fire's embers. Lucien stood at attention by the door, ready should his mistress require anything more. "Mother," Charles said softly, lifting his glass, "today was more than a celebration of bricks and mortar. It was the reaffirmation of what truly matters: family, care, and compassion." Simone smiled, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Yes, my son. In every corridor we opened, in every child's drawing we admired, I saw the hands of community reaching out." She gazed into the flames. "I have spent years haunted by the past, by the voice in the sealed study, by the locked secrets beneath the floorboards. Yet tonight I realize those echoes were guiding me toward you." Poirot inclined his head. Sometimes the heart's whisper is more persuasive than any mystery we solve. You followed its guidance with courage. Lady Marston laid a gentle hand on Simone's arm. "And you have given Charles a home and a legacy to carry forward. My father would have been proud of this. Proud of you both." A gentle silence settled, punctuated only by the fire's crackle. Outside, the moon rose, casting silver beams through the tall windows, and illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. Charles stood and approached the window, his reflection merging with the night sky. "Mother," he said, "tomorrow I must write letters to Isabel and Marguerite, introducing them to their grandmother, and to the board of the foundation, planning our next steps." He turned, a hint of hesitation in his eyes. "But first, I want to hear more about the early days here. Tell me once again of my childhood, of father's journals, of the first time you read me bedtime stories in this very room." Simone rose and crossed to stand beside him. She laid a hand on his shoulder, her voice soft. "You were but 2 summers old when I first brought you here. The wisteria was in bloom, and you toddled among the fallen petals, giggling as I chased you, with tickles. Your laughter echoed off these walls long before any phantom voice disturbed our peace. Your father and I often sat by this hearth, planning your future, imagining you as a scholar or explorer." Charles closed his eyes, imagining the scene. "I wish I could have remembered." She smiled gently. "Memory is a gift and a burden. What matters is that we rebuild our shared history now. We will fill these years with new moments. Picnics in the rose garden, study sessions in the library, festival gatherings in the great hall. Your children, too, will learn these stories as part of their own." Poirot rose, smoothing his coat. "And I shall be honoured to witness those new memories unfold, so long as my services continue to be required." His small smile carried warmth. After all, one never knows when another mystery may arise, even within familiar walls. Marston laughed softly. "Monsieur Poirot, I suspect the only mystery here will be why you never seem to tire of your hat and moustaches." He tapped his bowler with a modest flourish. "A detective's uniform is as integral as a knight's armour." Lucien bowed. "May I draw the curtains and extinguish the lamps, madame? It has been a long day, and the manor rests more peacefully than it has in many years." Simone nodded. "Yes, Lucien, thank you." He moved through the room, closing the heavy drapes one by one, and then blew out each lamp until only the hearth remained alight. Charles returned to sit beside his mother. He took her hand and held it gently. "Mother, I will ensure the manor's stories are told, for generations to come. Soldiers, scholars, nurses, gardeners, children, they will all have a place within these walls." Tears glistened in Simone's eyes. "And I will stand by your side. Together we will honour everyone who has loved, and even those who have wronged us, because their deeds led us here." Poirot settled back down, his expression content. "Then let us toast once more to Ashbourne Manor, to family reborn, and to mysteries solved with love." Charles and Simone raised their glasses, meeting Poirot's gaze. "To love," they echoed. As the final sip of claret warmed them, the manor seemed to breathe its centuries-old timbers alive with possibility. Outside, the moon sailed higher, and the night embraced them in its quiet splendour. In the stillness of those twilight reflections, past and present merged seamlessly, promising that the future too would unfold with grace, hope, and the enduring bonds of the heart. Chapter 18. Echoes Fulfilled. The morning sun broke over the horizon in brilliant hues of rose and gold, flooding Ashbourne Manor with warmth and promise. In the great hall, Madame Baudouin and Charles stood before the portrait gallery that lined the western wing, now aptly named the Charles-Étienne Baudouin Gallery. Each canvas depicted a moment in the manor's storied past. From Étienne's wedding portrait to Charles's childhood in the rose garden, and finally the recent commemorations of the Foundation's work with local children. Simone's hand trembled as she reached out to touch the glass of her son's earliest likeness, her heart swelling with both nostalgia and gratitude. At her side, Charles offered a gentle smile, his own eyes bright with pride. Poirot entered quietly, his bowler hat held respectfully against his chest. Lucien followed, bearing a silver tray of champagne flutes. "Monsieur Poirot," Charles greeted, "we were just admiring the gallery's final additions." Simone turned, her voice steady. "Yes, Hercule, these paintings celebrate not only our family, but the community we vowed to uplift." Poirot's grey cells twitched with approval. "A fitting tribute, madame. The very stones of this house hum with your compassion and perseverance." He handed them each a flute. "May this day be as memorable as it is hopeful." As they raised their glasses, Lady Marston and Sister Anne entered from the adjoining parlour, their presence a reminder of the bonds forged through adversity. Lady Marston carried a small gilded box. "Madame Baudouin," she announced, "my father desired that you receive this token, a key to the private chapel of Vaucelles, so that you may honour Charles's French roots whenever you wish." Simone accepted it reverently, tears glistening. "Thank you, Eleanor. I will cherish this bijou, a symbol of our family's unity across nations." The chapel key in Simone's palm seemed to pulse with significance, bridging the secrecy of hidden passages and deceitful voices with the transparency of love's enduring echo. Charles placed his arm around his mother's shoulders as they descended the grand staircase into the manor's chapel, newly restored with stained-glass windows that depicted scenes of hope, healing, and reunion. Sunlight poured through the multicoloured panes, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the marble floor. Lucienne lit the altar candles, their flickering glow mingling with the morning rays. Inside the chapel, Dr. Whitaker and the manor's gardener, Mr. Sorensen, tended to a small garden plot visible through a side alcove window. There, new rose bushes, symbols of rebirth, had been planted in neat rows. Sister Anne led them in a brief benediction. "Let this space remind us that faith, kindness, and forgiveness can unlock even the most sealed of hearts." Simone placed the chapel key on the altar alongside a single white rose, then turned to place her hand over Charles's. Each gesture sealed their shared story in the manor's sacred heart. Returning to the garden, Charles knelt beside the blooming roses. He pressed the soil gently around the base of a pale pink cultivar, the very variety he had chosen days before as his mother's favourite. Mother, he said softly, these roses will grow as our family does, rooted in the past, yet reaching ever toward the light. Simone crouched beside him, her fingers brushing the delicate petals. And so will our legacy, my son. As the chapel bell tolled 12, its resonance echoing through the grounds, Poirot watched from the veranda. He tipped his hat to the reunited family. And now, mes amis, the next chapter awaits, one written not in whispers from hidden rooms, but in the voices of laughter and life that will fill these halls. Lucien joined him, and together they observed the scene. Children playing among the rose bushes, villagers tending the foundation wing schoolroom, and Simone and Charles walking hand in hand toward the future. In that moment, Ashbourne Manor stood transformed. The phantom voice that once disturbed a sealed study had guided a mother through secrets and sorrow to this triumphant reunion. Every hidden mechanism discovered, every cylinder returned, and every threat unmasked had led to the profound truth that love transcends time and tragedy. And as the manor's ancient stones basked in the midday sun, their shadows long and contented, the echoes of the past harmonized with the living chorus of hope, forever fulfilled.